Hello everyone, it's Matt here from PCGamesN and I'm joined by Rich.
Hello.
And we are talking about Destiny 2. Very specifically, we're talking about a thing that's sort of like bugging the community quite a bit at the moment, which is referred to as the lore-pocalypse. There's been a massive kind of change in the overall kind of lore and story of Destiny. There's been a massive thing that's been taken away, essentially. We're talking about the darkness, and Rich here, who knows an awful lot about lore, is going to explain to me what exactly is going on.
Well, yeah, and so game director Luke Smith gave a couple of interviews before E3 where he talked about the broad themes and thrusts of Destiny 2's story. And you know, this is stuff that's been hinted at in the reveal trailers. It's all very interesting in and of itself. Basically, the story is going to be all about light and what happens when you, the player, the Guardian, loses their light, and Gaul, the big boss, the boss of the Cabal, the Red Legion, and how he covets the light, and you know what he wants to, and his motivations there. And that's all great. But it has meant that in order to focus on that, they've cut out quite a lot of the themes and the story thrusts that had been established in the prequel. Well, not the prequel, the original. Yeah. And that's a little bit controversial. I mean, the Exo Stranger is one example. She's the robot lady who, even if you're on PC and you maybe weren't paying attention to Destiny first time around, you might have heard the memes where it's, you know, I don't have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
I don't even have time to explain why I don't have time to explain.
Which is a little bit of silly dialogue there.
Sure.
But you know, she's gone. And what's a little bit odd is that Luke Smith told PC Gamer that he thinks the Exo Stranger storyline has been exited or wrapped up fairly effectively, which it was probably fair to say that's news to some of us.
Sure.
Because she kind of exited on a little bit of a cliffhanger, and we didn't really learn much about who she was, where she was from, what her motivations or agendas were. So, you know, that's a little bit interesting. But the real victim, the biggest excision, as it were, is the darkness, which we hear isn't going to be explored at all in Destiny 2.
So sort of like the two key sort of themes in Destiny seem to have been light and darkness. So explain to me what are these kind of concepts, and why is it important or controversial that sort of like the darkness has been taken away?
Well, I mean, they are left quite vague, and one sort of sensed in Destiny 1 that was deliberate, and that, you know, we might hear, because we've known from the beginning that it's going to be a long-term series, right? And the impression that we had in Destiny 1 is that these questions would be taken up later in the series. All we really know is that the light is the Traveler's power, the Traveler being the big white orb that gives Guardians their power, and it's implied to be some kind of benevolent cosmic force that gives you space magic.
Sure. That sounds great.
That sounds great, right? Like, kind of like the Force, really.
Yep.
And the darkness, as in the real world, is basically just the anti-light.
And not a weird rock band from the early 2000s.
No, certainly not them, thank goodness. But it's just another cosmic force, which is the enemy of the Traveler, and that's all we really know for sure. That said, there are lots of theories that are hinted at in the original Destiny's lore that sort of talk a little bit about what the darkness could be, and they're all really interesting. So there's a grimoire card which goes into detail, and one position is that the darkness is a physical and a moral force, like a manifestation or an actualization of evil. Then there's another view that suggests it's simply a massively powerful but tangible alien armada, and then there's a third view which suggests that it's a highly advanced intelligence which appears godlike to us because of its technology. And you know, there are lots more views that are hinted at in the original Destiny's lore, which all of the original alien species kind of fit loosely into. And you know, you think that this is just cool lore, but now that we learn that Bungie have actually said they don't know what the darkness was, maybe they hadn't come to a view on it themselves, which I think the controversial thing about all of this is it sort of shakes your confidence in Bungie's writing.
Sure, yeah. I mean, it's kind of like it's their creation, and surely they should own that.
Yeah.
You know, for as far as I can see, it's like you created it. It's therefore your job, surely, to back that up and to essentially, if you don't know what it is, to go and sit in your writer's room and figure out what it is.
Yeah, and in another one of these interviews, I think this one with Kotaku, Luke Smith basically comes out and says, we straight up don't know what the darkness is, objectively. So there are all these other theories, and like, you know, you think it's raising these interesting questions that are going to be explored later, and Luke Smith has said that we'll come back, or we might come back to the question of what the darkness actually is later in the series again, but it's being left out of Destiny 2.
Sure. And how do you think that might affect kind of like, is that something that might cause retcons? Like, so for example, I know that the Awoken race are kind of humans that kind of almost got too close to the darkness, wasn't it? Or something akin to that. So do you think that they're kind of like, they're just going to push that to the side for Destiny 2 and just not explain these kind of things?
It certainly seems clear that they're leaving quite a lot on the cutting room floor, as it were, for Destiny 2. And they're definitely going with a much more focused storyline around Ghaul and like why he covets the light and what a world without light looks like. And this has been controversial in a lot of ways, because like on one level, it's simply that the original Destiny had a fairly confusing story, which nonetheless raised a bunch of interesting sort of philosophical questions, and we were all hoping to learn more about that in the sequel. And you know, this new angle with Ghaul coveting the light, it's not hinted at all in the original. We knew that the Cabal were going to be the enemies at some point, because there's a mission in the Taken King where the Cabal there send a distress call back to their Cabal Emperor. But this idea that Ghaul has now deposed the Emperor and that he's come back with this agenda of coveting the light and everything, that's all completely new. And on one level it makes sense, because maybe they're trying to get, you know, they're sort of relaunching Destiny almost, especially to us on PC. And it's helpful from that perspective to start from a clean slate. And again, it's not that these new questions and themes aren't interesting. It's just that one worries that, you know, are they as good as what we could have had originally?
So presumably you share a certain amount of the concerns that the community have at large.
Yeah. Yeah. What gets me is I just have this like this sort of sucking feeling of dread that the more that this sort of thing happens. And you could look again at another Kotaku article from a year or two back, which sort of explored the way that Destiny's story was chopped and changed in the year that it was delayed before release. Like I say, it shakes your confidence in Bungie and their writing. I have this sense that when Destiny was conceived as this big long-term project, that there was at one point an epic, coherent storyline that looked at all these questions and said something really interesting. And there was hints of this, like I say, you know, the Grimoire cards that explore the nature of the darkness. There's hints of this in the game already. And there was concept art on Earth that showed the interior of the Traveler and its walls curving upwards, sort of like it was the inside of a sphere. And the backdrop to that was the Black Garden, or very similar to the Black Garden. So there was this hint at one time that, you know, the Traveler might have been evil, and that we were, you know, literally just sort of reanimated corpses doing its bidding. You know, being manipulated to destroy its enemies and things, and all of that sounded really interesting. And if that's been abandoned, and we're going off in all these new sorts of directions, and it looks like Bungie is sort of almost making it up as they go along, then it's not that this stuff isn't good. It's what could we have had?
Sure.
That's my concern.
I think I certainly share some of your concerns. I would always like to think that a game of this kind of scope had been pre-planned, and there were very specific components that would be moved over a set amount of games and expansions. I also still have that faith, because I very much have enjoyed Bungie's work in previous games. I love the Halo lore, and so far, even though I don't know it to the extent that you do, Rich, I do enjoy the philosophical nature of Destiny's lore, so hope that at least that strand flows through. It's certainly an interesting thing to think about, definitely controversial, but do you feel that this is controversial? If you've got any issues that you want to kind of chat about this lore-pocalypse issue, do start talking in the comments below. Say what you like, say what you dislike, what you're hoping to see from Destiny over subsequent games and expansions. And if you did enjoy the video, please do give us a like and subscribe to the channel. There's going to be plenty more Destiny 2 coverage coming up as we approach the October 24th release date on PC. Until next time though, good luck and have fun.
Take care.